The walkie-talkie helped win the Second World War, launched a civilian radio craze that overwhelmed the FCC with over 1 million license applications per month, and eventually became the foundation for the push-to-talk communication that billions of people use on their smartphones today. 3 separate engineers on 2 different continents built it independently within 3 years of each other, and the origin story behind it is genuinely disputed to this day. So how did one of the most consequential inventions of the 20th century become one of the least recognized? It was 1937 in Trail, British Columbia, and a British-born Canadian engineer named Donald Hings was trying to solve a problem that had nothing to do with warfare. Hings was working for the Consolidated Mining and Smelting Company, and his problem was straightforward but dangerous. Pilots flying supply runs over remote mining sites in the Canadian Rockies had no reliable way to talk to ground crews below them. So Hings built what he called a pack set, a portable 2-way radio weighing roughly 5 pounds and standing about 17 inches tall, capable of transmitting voice between aircraft and the ground. That prototype worked well enough that when Canada entered the Second World War in 1939, the Canadian military sent Hings to Ottawa to adapt his invention for battlefield deployment. His best-known wartime model, the C-58, sold approximately 18,000 units for infantry use. And for that contribution, Hings was made a member of the Order of the British Empire in 1946. But Hings was not the only person working on this idea. In Cleveland, Ohio, a teenager named Al Gross had independently begun developing his own handheld 2-way radio around 1938, with no knowledge of what Hings was building in Canada. Gross would eventually bring his radio expertise to the Office of Strategic Services during the war, the intelligence agency that preceded the CIA, where he helped develop a covert ground-to-air communication system codenamed Joan Eleanor. And at the same time, in 1940, Galvin Manufacturing Company, the firm that would later rename itself Motorola, received a contract from the United States War Department to build a portable FM voice radio for infantry. The engineering team behind this effort, led by Daniel Noble and principal radio frequency engineer Henryk Magnuski, alongside Marion Bond, Lloyd Morris, and Bill Vogel, would go on to produce the 2 devices that defined World War II portable radio communication. And the timing of what came next was almost too perfect. For a while, these portable radios went by practical, forgettable names like pack set, wireless set, and 2-way field radio. That quiet anonymity did not last. Sometime in the early 1940s, a war correspondent, and most historical accounts point to a journalist based in Toronto, watched soldiers walking freely around a military demonstration with radios strapped to their backs, talking as they moved across open ground. The nickname Walkie-Talkie appeared in press coverage shortly after, and within a couple of years it had replaced every other name the public was using for the technology. The first device to earn that label in a handheld sense was the SCR-536. Developed by a Motorola team led by Chief Engineer Don Mitchell beginning in 1940 and entering mass production by July of 1941. The SCR-536 was the first fully self-contained military radio that a soldier could hold in one hand. It ran on 5 vacuum tubes, weighed about 5 pounds with batteries, operated on a single fixed channel, and had a range of roughly a quarter mile. Total wartime production was at minimum in the tens of thousands and likely well over 100,000 units. The SCR-536 first saw combat during the Allied landings in North Africa in November of 1942, and it was carried on to Omaha Beach on D-Day in June of 1944. The larger and arguably more consequential model was the SCR-300. the backpack-mounted FM radio that historians agree was the device first widely nicknamed Walkie-Talkie by the press. The SCR-300 weighed roughly 35 pounds, operated across 41 channels in the 40 to 48 megahertz range, and delivered a usable range of 3 to 8 miles depending on terrain. Nearly 50,000 units were produced during the war, and the device is specifically credited with helping restore Allied communications during the chaos of the Battle of the Bulge. Soldiers actually called the handheld SCR-536 the Handy-Talkie, though the two names blurred together in popular memory over the following decades. What did not blur was the technological gap. Neither the German nor the Japanese military fielded a true equivalent to the SCR-536's one-handed portability, giving Allied infantry a communication advantage that influenced engagements across multiple theaters of the war. This story, though, was about to expand far beyond the military. When the Second World War ended, surplus Motorola handy-talkies and other military radios flooded into civilian hands across North America at prices ordinary people could afford. Amateur radio operators, many of whom had served in military signal corps roles during the war, were among the first to acquire and modify this surplus equipment for personal use. Motorola later donated public safety radios to amateur radio clubs through civil defense programs throughout the 1950s and 60s, accelerating a shift that had already begun on its own. The person who recognized the commercial potential of that shift earliest was the same Al Gross who had been building radios as a teenager in Cleveland. After the war, Gross founded the Citizens Radio Corporation to manufacture handheld CB radios for the general public, receiving FCC approval in 1948. His company sold over 100,000 units, mostly to farmers managing wide stretches of rural land and to the United States Coast Guard. The FCC had created the Citizens Radio Service in 1945 to give ordinary citizens their own slice of radio spectrum. But the version of CB radio that an entire generation remembers, the 27 MHz Class D band, was formally established on September 11, 1958. That regulatory decision would take nearly 2 decades to fully detonate into mainstream American culture. The catalyst was the 1973 oil crisis and the nationwide 55-mile-per-hour speed limit that followed. Truck drivers across the United States adopted CB radios to share real-time information about fuel availability, road conditions, and speed traps, and the culture surrounding CB radio exploded far beyond the trucking industry. Films like Smokey and the Bandit and Convoy, along with television shows like The Dukes of Hazzard, carried CB slang and trucker culture into living rooms nationwide. At the peak of the CB craze, the FCC was reportedly receiving over 1 million license applications per month. That is the kind of volume that forces a government agency to completely rethink how it manages a service, and eventually that is exactly what happened, because the licensing requirement for CB was dropped entirely. Nobody who soldered together that original pack set in a remote Canadian mining town could have predicted that within 4 decades, the same basic technology would be shrink-wrapped in plastic and sold as a children's toy. But as transistor technology shrank radio components throughout the 1950s and 60s, walkie-talkies became affordable enough for mass consumer production. And by the 1970s and 80s, they were one of the defining recreational products for families across North America. In 1977, the FCC formally moved the frequency allocation for unlicensed consumer walkie-talkies from 27 megahertz, which was now overwhelmed by CB traffic, up to 49 megahertz, giving toy and family radios a cleaner slice of spectrum separate from the CB boom. The next major regulatory milestone arrived in 1996, when the FCC created the Family Radio Service, a simple, license-free walkie-talkie band in the UHF range designed for families and casual users. Radio Shack had first proposed the concept in 1994, and the adoption curve that followed was striking. FRS radio sales climbed from 500,000 units in 1997 to 5 million in 1999, and then to 9.5 million by 2001. Motorola's Talkabout line, alongside Cobra and AudioVox, dominated retail shelves. In just 4 years, the walkie-talkie had gone from battlefield relic to something a family could pick up at a gas station for the cost of a tank of fuel. The more capable licensed sibling of FRS, the General Mobile Radio Service, was modernized by the FCC in 2017 with expanded channel access and data transmission capability. A GMRS license today costs $35 for 10 years and covers an entire household, making it one of the most accessible entry points into licensed radio communication anywhere in the world. You would reasonably expect that in an era where nearly every person carries a smartphone capable of instant global communication, the walkie-talkie would have quietly faded into obsolescence alongside the telegram and the pager. It has not, and the reason is worth understanding. The two-way radio industry is currently shifting from analog to digital standards, including DMR, P25, and Tetra protocols, driven by demand from public safety agencies, military operations, and construction sites in remote locations. The core advantage, keeping walkie-talkies relevant, is the exact same one that made them indispensable on the beaches of Normandy in 1944. They do not depend on cellular network infrastructure. When hurricanes destroy cell towers along coastlines, when wildfires consume equipment in mountain terrain, when crews work underground where no signal can reach, the two-way radio is still the device that works. Push-to-talk over cellular applications like Zello represent the newest evolution, essentially bringing the walkie-talkie experience onto smartphone networks rather than replacing it. And that detail reveals something important about what the walkie-talkie actually accomplished over 9 decades. It did not just introduce a piece of hardware. It introduced a communication behavior, the instinct to press a button and speak to someone instantly without dialing, without waiting, without depending on anything beyond the radio waves between 2 points. That behavior turned out to be so fundamental that it survived every technological revolution that followed. 3 engineers in the late 1930s converged on the same idea because the need it addressed was universal, and the devices they built went on to reshape warfare, create civilian radio culture, fill toy store shelves, launch a CB craze that overwhelmed federal regulators, and seed the push-to-talk patterns that billions of people still use on their phones today. The walkie-talkie did not just connect soldiers on a battlefield. It proved that two-way radio could belong to everyone. And that idea turned out to be far more durable than any of the hardware it was ever built into.